Okay, the following action was taken. New hires, junior class advisor, stipend, Misty Knight, Hoopa High, 21-22 school year, effective date 10/28/21. Volunteer JV boys basketball coach, non-stipend, Aaron Williams, new hire, Hoopa High, 21-22 school year, effective date 11/15/21. Volunteer varsity boys basketball coach, non-stipend, Justin Hunt, new hire, Hoopa High, 21-22 school year, effective date 11/29/21. Volunteer wrestling coach, non-stipend, Robert Baldy, new hire, Hoopa High, 21-22 school year, effective date 11/22/21. Cheer coach stipend, Ashley Skiles, new hire, Orleans, 21-22 school year. We don't have an effective date yet. Basketball coach.
No, wait, that wasn't Orleans, that's Trinity Valley.
Oh, it's Trinity Valley?
Yeah.
Okay, no, Trinity Valley. Thank you, Justin. And then basketball coach stipend, Shane McCullough, new hire, Trinity Valley, 21-22 school year. Resignations, ground supervisor classified, Trinity Valley, 3 hours, 195 days, effective date 11/24/21.
And this one too, right? The board approves the unrepresented certificated management and superintendent the one-time payment to equal the amount given to certificated employees for the 2021 school year.
Can I go ahead? Can I address the?
Sure.
Because they're not applauding, so.
Yeah. So they evidently didn't understand what we just said.
So the intention was, all employees got a one-time payment to offset some of the additional costs for health and welfare benefits. That was across the board. Additionally, each of the units received a one-time stipend. The calculation was based on the cost of 3% for the classified and 3% for the certificated. And generally, as certificated managers, you would follow suit with what the certificated unit gets. Because that wasn't happening and the school year was kind of winding down, the board approved to give the principals, assistant superintendent, what the classified managers got, but now they're upping it to what you would have gotten if we had been reconciled at that time. So you received a payment of $1,169. So the board just approved to reconcile that and make it the $2,208 that the KTJUSD got.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Martha.
Yeah.
We've already seen for the check.
Public comment. In order to provide public comment, please complete the speaker's form prior to the board resuming open session.
And we do not have any.
We don't have any public comment.
No.
Superintendent's reports.
Okay, so I am going to read my report about district business after Shin gives his presentation about district business. Shin Green is here from East Shore Consulting. He's been our champion through a lot of the financial intricacies of our GEO bond refinancing, our upcoming COP resolution, which ultimately takes us, this is the beginning steps of taking us to the construction of the Itech building and relieving some of our financial burdens. So thank you, Chin.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. I do have a presentation prepared. I'm not sure if that's available in your packets or online, but I'll go ahead if it's not available online and just turn in and provide a little bit of background to start. Back in 2008, the district embarked on a facilities modernization project to really touch all of the various school campuses of the district. And that project included use of GEO bonds, state aid funding, the school facilities program to modernize schools. However, shortly after starting that modernization work, it was determined that there were significant mold issues present at just about all the campuses, and the district was basically required to enter the school facility program, financial hardship program, to enhance its funding available from the state. By doing that, the district was able to raise significantly more state funding, limiting the amount of local resources, and given the depth and breadth of the issues with mold at the various campuses, was really a needed source to get you guys home. And at the end, I believe there was over $90 million of such state funding actually received by the district. Along the way in 2016, the district issued its 2016 certificates of participation. And those 2016 certificates of participation were essentially issued to advance some of that state funding that would eventually be received from the hardship program. And the advancement was done using a resolution that the state prefers you use when you advance their funds. And it basically says that once you receive state money, you'll pay that back. So the idea was you issue the 2016 COP basically as a bridge loan to state funding. Of course, in 2016, and as the school facilities program is known to work, usually their funding lags a little bit, where you only receive the funding after you've already started the project. So very common to go down this pathway to advance funding from the school facility program, oftentimes using COPs. However, in hardship, it creates a bunch of different additional rules and has created some complexities for the projects as we round them out and kind of come to the close. In addition, because of the nature of construction costs here in the Valley, being somewhat higher than other parts of the state, the projects all exceeded the state allocated funding. The state allocates funding based upon a peanut butter average of what it would cost to do such projects throughout the state. By you guys being a little more rural and remote and a little bit more off the beaten path, you have additional costs for bringing in work crews as well as materials and supplies that generally will drive your costs of construction up. And so while the state provided hardship funding, which in theory provides 100% of the necessary resources to complete the projects at the state average cost, the actual cost here exceeds that. And so in order to keep projects moving and get projects completed, the district began to use some of its own resources. However, eventually that resulted in some encroachment in the general fund, basically taking the general fund resources to get projects done that were partially funded by the state, although they claim they would fully fund it. So basically due to that encroachment to the general fund back in 2019, the board here directed everyone to take a pause on any additional construction projects and make sure we kind of had a defined pathway to complete the Itech building without the same sort of encroachment on the general fund in the near term. In other words, want to figure out a way that it didn't hit the general fund immediately and take away operational resources to complete the Itech. And I'm glad to say that I believe today we do have a pathway to that. But really, the remaining project that is left on that original list is that Itech building. Just about everything else has been completed as I understand it. And so we're kind of down to the last project, so to speak. Additionally, back in 2016, additionally, we identified some resources to try to repay the 2016 COPs, and we've been working on that for a number of years now. We've issued some GO bonds to pay off a portion, and tonight we'll talk also about how to kind of repay another portion. And so seeing that we have the presentation up, just want to point out and pause on that slide there for a second, but that red and gray building you see there is the rendering of the proposed new Itech building. How does it differ from the previous building? We'll get into details, but it is a slightly smaller facility, although it does kind of use the same architectural aesthetic that the original building had. But it's been quote unquote value engineered, and we are targeting the construction of that building within the resources that we have, which basically consist of some grant money, some matching funds, and some potential financing that the district can do to kind of round out the difference. So let's start off talking about the Itech replacement project. After more than 2 years of discussions with the state, specifically the Office of Public Schools Construction, and a lot of planning work, we are now in a place where we believe we have a pathway to achieve the construction of a replacement Itech building. The proposed replacement building will be somewhat smaller than the original, coming in at roughly 6,000 square feet as compared to the original 12,000 square foot building. District staff have been involved in the design of this new revised building. And the facility will be set up to accommodate all three of the original pathways that were provided through the Career Tech Education Program, those being woodworking, metalworking, and automotive repair. The total project cost, including soft cost and contingencies, as estimated by the architects currently, is $6.6 million. And we'll show you how we're going to get to that amount here in a second. The project is subject to certain limitations related to the grant that we have. Interesting enough, when the grant was put in, the grant really only focused on one of the CTE pathways, the woodworking side of things. And so really those grant funds are to build a building that will serve the woodworking. However, we have got design features in there that will allow the right depth of concrete to allow auto lifts to be added and other facilities, rather other equipment to be added in to serve the other two functions afterwards. And we'll kind of talk about that and how it will all work. But the initial grant that you're receiving, which is $3 million from the Career Tech Education Facilities Program of $3 million and the matching funds of $3 million, are basically to build a career tech education facility focused on woodworking. Once the building is complete, you can run whichever programs you like in there, and the design has contemplated all three programs, and there will be some funding available to equip it for all three programs from non-grant sources. So with that being said, if we just flip to the next page, you'll get to see a little layout of the interior of that building and how it's divided up. These are all renderings that are, I think, fairly close to what we're going to finally land on at the end of the day. I believe there's a new wall added in the latest one that goes kind of in between the two sides of the building in the front with those two bays. You'll see the lifts there, the space for equipment storage in the back, etc. So while it's not quite as big as the original building, it should have all the functionality, and that's sort of been one of the things I've been asking as we talk about the plans and the like is, you know, with your staff, does this meet your needs? Is this going to be a functional building? And it seems that your CTE kind of instructors and whatnot have been involved and feel that it will. So the Itech project in November received reinstatement of the plans. And let me just go back a little bit in time. The Department of State architect, and yes, this will be an alphabet soup night. I'll be giving you all sorts of 3-letter and 4-letter acronyms that relate to various state parties, but the Department of State architect, which approves all kinds of school construction plans in California, had approved the original 12,000 square foot building. During the period which we were paused, those plans had lapsed. They usually allow those plans to be active for up to 3 years. So we had to go back and have those original plans reinstated. Why? So we can have a DSA ID number. That DSA ID number is what's needed to facilitate the grants. And using all of that, what will happen is we will essentially have the building as it was originally designed, or as it was originally planned in its plans into DSA to reserve a number in January, about mid-January, a revised set of plans for this building, which we just showed you of 6,000 square feet, will be provided to them to amend the existing number, which will keep you on track for receiving the grant money. And there's a lot of different agencies involved here, so we're kind of trying to meld all their different processes and keep everything in the right place to keep them all happy. But the plan is to submit the revised Itech plans in mid-January, which should allow time for completion of the construction over the summer time period and preserving those grant funds, and also should put us in a place where we have that building complete at some point, maybe not the beginning of next school year, but sometime during that next school year. And we did, as part of this, because it is a smaller building, make sure that we reserved one wall that was sort of untouched, so that if you ever wanted to expand the building or there was a reason, there would be a reasonable and sensible way to do it. It wouldn't cost you an exorbitant amount of money if that should come to fruition. So let's look at our sources for funding this Itech building. We have the CTEFT grant, which is actually the next to the last line. And if I go up to the top, there's a certificate of participation to 2022, which would produce your matching funds. Ultimately, with that grant, we had two choices. We could go to the state and have them provide the loan to you for a period of time under their terms, or we could structure this as part of an overall loan that kind of hopefully solved everything, including some of the issues around the 2016. We propose that you use the 2022 COP essentially as your cleanup instrument to deal with all of the various pieces of closing out these projects and the matching source for funding for this CTE-FP grant. In addition, we are proposing that you issue about $1 million of that COP above and beyond what you need for the matching money. As noted, the cost for the facility, including contingencies, is about 6.6. So it's a little above the 6 million that we have in the grant and the matching fund. And just in my experience, I've known that in the past, you guys have had some cost run over, some difficulty getting the right bids in. I want enough surge capacity in there that we can make sure we get home on this project once we start. I do not want to have a half-completed Itech building as the legacy of all this that we've done. So I would like you to have that extra money. If that money is not needed to complete the envelope of the building, those are additional funds that you can use to equip for the other CTE pathways, whether it's wood, whether it's metal shop or auto. Provide you about maybe 400,000 in funding to do that if the contingencies are all used, but gives you a little bit over so that additional equipment can be put in there. The proposed grant and everything does not include all of the equipment for all the pathways, so it would be a very sensible use of funds, kind of make it fully functional. And the good news is, and I'll show you this at the end, we can make all of this happen at a cost that's probably going to be less than the existing debt obligations that you have. So we're not adding to the obligation to repay, not costing the district any more out of its coffers, but getting a lot more out of that than what you originally had. And we'll walk over that in a second here as well. In terms of the Itech funding, I think we've talked about this, but it's $3 million in construction funding from the grant, $3 million in matching sources. There was, as you may recall, hardship funds assigned to this project. In talking with the folks at OPSC, and we went over this in great detail, we are not going to apply for those hardship funds, and here's the reason why. The Itech building was originally subject to an insurance offset, which kind of changes the math at OPSC for what they give you under hardship. And because of that, essentially, the hardship funding would only kick in if we were to build in excess of 7,500 square feet. We're proposing a 6,000 square foot building. Looking at this at being, a fully burdened cost of almost $1,000 a square foot for construction of the school facilities, the additional 1,500 square feet would not be free. It would cost additional money. It would require additional general fund encroachment. And quite frankly, if we got to 7,500, it would be the first pennies of that hardship money. In order to get the full amount, it would prorate between 7,500 and 12,000 square feet. We did the math. It just doesn't seem to make sense to chase after that money. While you could get a little more money from the state, you'll end up spending significant amounts more to build that big of a building. And it just does not have another funding source. And per the direction of the board, we don't want to spend an extra $3 or $4 million to chase down $2.5 million that will cost the general fund ultimately that $3 million to get there. We just don't think the resources are there. And we believe that the mission of the Itech and the CTE program can be run within the building as designed. So we did decide that we would take ourselves off that hardship piece. The good news about that is that makes this a non-hardship project. So a lot of the things we ran into about, the use of excess funds and all that stuff are off the table for this project. That allows you to apply that additional $1 million as well as put any additional equipment in you'd like because it's not subject to those hardship rules. So it gives you a little more flexibility. But again, it was based on the original design, and we just don't see a way to get home there. And given that the district already kind of collected about $90 million out of the hardship in other state programs, it just wouldn't be worth the chase of those last couple of dollars, in our opinion. But that's not the end of your state money. There actually is some due to you, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So if I can just flip over to the next page, that schedule of numbers. This is the proposed repayment structure for the CTE-FP grant matching funds in the $1 million of Itech project with issuance-related costs and the like, and issuance discounts that are associated with the structure of the markets right now. Principal amount is $4.25 million, but in this current environment, total cost to repay is only about 5.8. That's about $1.5, $1.6 million in interest. And you'll notice it's a somewhat rough structure there. It's not even payments all the way down. The intent is to meld these with the refinancing of your other COP debt to give you a level payment. And we'll show you that here in a second. So, yes, Karen.
Okay, so
I see a whole bunch of stars right in the middle of this. Can you explain what that is?
Sure thing. Those stars are indicative of having multiple interest rates. And so what happens when we sell bonds is some pieces will go to some buyers at one interest rate, perhaps another at a different interest rate. There's also a combination of taxable and tax exempt bonds going on here. And so when we have more than one rate going on, those stars simply indicate that it's a melded rate. There's not a single coupon rate there. I'll show you a single coupon rate if there's one kind of coupon projected. And you'll see that that generally is the case for those kind of smaller amounts and those larger amounts. The kind of middle amounts, we're going to target different buyers for that in our anticipation. So it might be 2% for one buyer with a certain yield, 3% for a different buyer with a slightly different yield. At the end of the day, without boring you with bond pricing kind of mathematics, the price that they pay kind of changes based upon the combination of coupon and yield. You could have a higher coupon, lower yield, or a lower coupon, higher yield, and still have the same price. So we're pricing the bonds at the same kind of price for the buyer, but this is just kind of targeting different investors. Some institutional investors like higher coupons because they advertise them in their retirement fund investments and things of that nature. Others want simple market rate coupons. And so our modeling of this kind of reflected a universe of buyers with melded coupons. With that being said, the next page kind of shows you the sources and uses, and 4.25 will be the total principal amount. 3 million of those proceeds would go to the matching funds. 1 million would go to what we call the construction fund for additional Itech expenditures. The rest is associated with issuance costs. We will see a rounding amount here. Anytime we're kind of playing with trying to size things in, you may end up with a rounding amount. To the extent when we meld the two, have a rounding amount that's above $5,000 or $10,000, we'll actually reduce the size of the issuance by that amount. But because they're split up, we kind of got to run each one separately. My punchline there is that rounding amounts will eventually go back to the benefit of the district. It'll either go to offset your repayments in the future or be crossed out if we can zero them out at the time of the issuance. It's just, you can't always get the numbers to match up 100% when you're doing the bond issuance, especially with the refunding. So looking at the rest of this, really quite a respectable repayment ratio for something that's going to be a 20-year borrowing, roughly of $1.37 for every dollar borrowed, significantly less than what was done in the 2015 and 16 COPs, and would mature at the same time as the existing 15 or 16 COPs would have as well. 2045 is the maturity date. Any questions about the proposed Itech project or the funding of the grant and the kind of new money stuff? If not, I'll move on to the refinancing components. Excellent. Next thing we'll talk about is the refinancing of the 2016 COPs. And as you may well be aware, this is the issuance that has offended many of the folks at the state, because their belief was that you should have repaid that immediately with the resources they sent you for hardship. The reality is, if you had done that, there would be uncompleted projects sitting out here today. So you had to complete projects, and we worked out a way and kind of figured out other resources over time to help pay this down. But today we have roughly $4.3 million of additional resources we believe can be applied to the reduction of the 2016 COP balance. $2.5 million of that will be resources that are from the general fund, sort of things that are freed up by virtue of recent flexibility through stimulus money and the like. And combing all the potential corners of all the books that we could find, we did find that there is $600,000 actually left in the general obligation bond project fund, uncommitted to any project. It appears to be some funds that were transferred in from the general fund in the past. And so we will apply those to the application of repaying the 2016 COP as well. And then finally, there's about $1.2 million in hardship money that's due to the district on appeals. We will be writing a letter with the final plan of finance pursuant to your approval of this arrangement here to OPSC to let them know this is what we'll be doing, this is how we'll apply the funds. Once we dedicate and firmly give them the final plan of finance that says that those $1.2 million will be applied to 2016 repayment, they will send them. And they'll be in the county coffers. Talked with Barbara at OPSC about that, who's kind of the main contact we've been dealing with. And she's provided me the insight that as soon as we put that request in, those funds are ready to flow. So they will be available in time to apply for repayment of the 2016 COP. And keep in mind, they would only provide us those funds if we committed to and dedicated them to the 2016 COP. They are not new project funds, they are appeals, and in their opinion, unless they go to pay down the COP, they would not be sent. So with those sources, we believe that we can bring this 2016 COP down to a balance of about $2.7 million. Why is that number important? Ultimately, if they treat that $2.7 million as a district contribution to projects, they will look to reclaim that money from you. That will be much less than the $11.2 million they were looking to reclaim some years ago, but still a potential threat over your head. I've talked with Barbara about this. There's a lot of audits they have to complete and wrap up before they figure out what that exact amount will be. If it is a request to be repaid, they will now provide you flexibility of repaying it to the state over a 20-year window using their financing terms. The other alternative that you may have available to you, and we'll talk with staff about, is continuing to pursue a political legislative fix of some sort where we seek for special consideration given the nature of the cost profiles of your projects. And I still would strongly encourage that we talk with folks in Sacramento about potentially finding some way to potentially forego the clawback of that additional money. The way I look at it is $2.7 million in the grand scheme of the school facility program in the state of California, which is a multi-billion-dollar program, is not the make or break for that program. There's no project that's out there waiting for that money to come back. It's not going to save or add an extra year's worth of time to that program. And realistically, given the amount of effort and energy that the district has put in from its own contributions, we feel like there should be some consideration there. So we haven't given up on that. We will continue to see if we can avoid that. But at this point in time, if we apply the funds as anticipated, the worst case we believe would be the $2.7 million being requested back once the audits are complete.
Yeah, what is the current balance of the 2016 COP?
Current balance is actually $6.98 million, and you can see that in the schedule on the next page.
Okay.
And so with that 2.7 remaining, we believe it makes sense to refinance that. Current interest rates are very low. As you see, the new money component that we were talking about comes in at a 1.36 kind of repayment ratio. Funds are very cheap, much cheaper than when you borrowed in 2016. And we believe that we can reduce the interest expense on that by refinancing it by almost $3.5 million. That's how we end up doing this all for a lower cost than it was originally going to be. And at the end of the day, that $3.5 million reduction is interest expense that's saved. It'll be money that you don't have to send out of the general fund over time. It'll be money that you guys get to keep here in your coffers, reducing the overall burden over time. The reality is that what we had left was tail end maturities. We're going to smooth all of that out, begin making payments much sooner to bring the overall cost of debt down. And we put it all together with your new money for the Itech completion, should provide you with a very stable level repayment structure. And we'll show you that here in a couple of seconds. But we strongly encourage that you refinance that $6.98 million. If we go to the next page, you'll be able to see that that's the schedule of what remains. Really, the first principal payment starts on what remains in 2037, ends in 2045. At the end of the day, what we'll have left is, some portion of those maturities that come out to 2.7 million, give or take. And when we refinance it, we can begin paying principal much sooner. And by doing that, you're paying it at a lower interest rate than was originally issued. We would be at 3.625 on the long end in the worst of scenarios today. And the front end would be well below 2% and can produce some pretty significant savings. In addition to the 2016 COP, which the state doesn't like, you guys also issued a 2015 COP to provide some funding. And portions of that were repaid with the 2016A GEO bond issuance. To this date, I wish that the 2016A GEO bond issuance had actually repaid the 2016 COPs, because it would have put us in a much better condition, because we would have zero balance of the 2016s left at this point in time. We tried our best to figure out any way we could to shake that money loose and move it over to the 16. It just was not viable. Too many people own the COPs and the GO bonds that would have to agree to that, including banks and other entities that just have no rationale or reason to agree to that unless you provide them with some compensation for that consideration. We didn't see a reason to go there. We think you'll have a much easier time talking to the state about how that all worked out. And as one of your points of evidence to the state that realistically, perhaps that 2.7 should be forgiven because you did repay COP. It just wasn't the one that offended them that they want to claw back. So it's part of a narrative in a case that we're trying to build that, hey, this district has done its best and you really shouldn't try to ding them for the 2.7 that remains at the end of this. But that is a lobbying effort. I can't guarantee the outcomes of that, but would strongly encourage it. So at this point in time, there's about 1.23 million of the 2015 COPs left over. If we were to refinance them just kind of in a generic basis, they're right on the bubble. They don't produce a lot of savings, but by removing them, we can get rid of all your 15 COP debt and all your 16 COP debt and leave you with just a 22 COP instrument. Why would we want to do that? There's some political reasons and there's some fiscal reasons. One, if that's 15 COP does not save money when we refinance it, it will not get done. It will remain as is. We'll figure out a way to wrap around it. But there's currently a little bit of savings there. And even if it saves a couple of dollars, $100, $1,000, it's better than leaving it outstanding as it is. It also allows us to better shape the debt service and make some of the other things we're doing cheaper that would wrap around it while keeping a level payment. What I would say about the 15 COPs also and the 16s is that once we refinance them, they'll be legally defeased. And we've talked about this from the political optics standpoint in Sacramento, but when it comes to talking with legislators and other types, we want to be able to stand in front of them. And if they ask, well, where's the 2016 COP? We want to be able to say it no longer exists. We could certainly leave the balance outstanding, pay the extra interest costs, but by refinancing, you A, make it go away totally and completely so that you can honestly say the 2016 COP no longer exists. It's been defeased. And B, certainly saves money to the district by doing so over the long run. So our proposal will be to refinance both the 15 and 16 COPs. If we go to the next page, you'll see a comparison of that. And so on the left side, you'll see the combined melded 2015 and 16 COPs. On the right side, you'll see the proposed 2022 COP refinancing components. This is in addition to the components we looked at for funding the Itech and the CTEFP match. And you'll notice the coupons there are a little different. They got more digits beyond the decimal point. These will be done as taxable bonds, and I'll get into the rationale for all of that here in a second. Down at the bottom, you'll see the math that creates the difference. To the far right, you'll see the difference between those two repayment streams. About 7.86 million less overall, but we are applying $4.3 million of pay down with that. So the actual net interest rate savings or savings resulting from the refunding is about $3.5 million. It's a worthwhile savings to pursue. Low interest rate environment allows us to get that done today. Strongly encourage we take care of it and gives you the added benefit of being able to honestly say that the 2016 COP no longer exists. The state will still look at that component of the 2022 refunding that's left over as what's left over, but we're going to make an argument politically, hopefully, that they should ignore all of that and let you guys go on the whole thing. And from the political optics, again, the 16 COPs, once this is done, will be officially gone. There will not be anything out there that says they're outstanding, no more principal to be paid, no more interest to be paid. So if we put that all into the blender and put those two pieces together, both the refinancing and the new money component, you scroll to the next page, you'll see what that looks like. And you'll see a lot of those stars there because these are both taxable and tax exempt rates. So there are multiple rates in each of those years, except for the three kind of years in the very early part where we're just dealing with refinancing pieces. That all being said, if you look at the combined payments, we're looking at about $480,000 to $490,000 per year through the same term as the original 2016 16 COPs 2045. Total repayment comes in at 11.65 million for just over $8.5 million in borrowing. Total interest cost of about $3 million. And so the combined issuance of the 2016 COPs would achieve both the Itech completion as well as refinancing all the prior COP debt. And by combining them, we are saving on issuance costs. We're able to retire all the old COPs, give you a single instrument going forward that this is all assumed in. In terms of the cost that will be outside of what's funded, what's funding the escrow and the construction, the consultant cost would not exceed $200,000 combined. That's a lot less than it normally would be. We've gotten everyone to give consideration because we just completed a GO bond refunding as well with you guys. And so everyone's lowered their fees accordingly. The underwriter compensation is based upon the principal amount. They are proposing $7.50 for a bond, but would not exceed $65,000 at the end of the day in combination in total for all of the 2022 COPs. And so also for these 2022 COPs, we have proposed using bond insurance and a debt service surety reserve to avoid having to set aside additional cash for a reserve fund. It's the same thing you guys have done in your prior COPs in 2015 and 16. Very normal to do that for governmental COPs. So nothing really out of the ordinary there. If you flip one more page, please, you will see the summary of the sources and uses for all four components. And Series A and Series D are the two series that deal with the new construction and production of new money. Series B and C deal with the refinancing. Ultimately, what I would tell you is that when we actually sell these to the public, Series A and D will be melded together. They're the same type of bonds. They may have different coupons within them, but they'll be the same tax exempt type of bonds. Series B and C would be taxable bonds to facilitate the refinancing. C is using taxable bonds because it's an advanced refinancing. B is using taxable bonds because the definition of what allows us to redeem the 2016 COPs has some language defects in it that we need to use taxable bonds to make them allowable to repay now. The other option, if we didn't have that taxable bond sale for the Series B and C, would be to have those funds sit in an escrow account for 4 or 5 years. The problem is if we sit those funds in an escrow account, you have to pay interest on the bond. They're not redeemed right away. We can't legitimately say at the end that the 2016 bonds are totally gone. Whereas in this case, we will be able to say legitimately that the 2016 bonds are totally paid off once this transaction is done. So that's the rationale for using the taxable, yes.
So by taxable, what is taxable?
Got it. So the difference between taxable and tax exempt is that traditionally when you're doing public projects, you will issue tax exempt bonds, which means that the owners of those bonds do not pay tax on the interest which they receive. That allows the owners of those bonds to ostensibly take a lower rate of return because it doesn't get dinged for taxes. Ordinarily, that difference is pretty big, but normally we would use tax exempt bonds for public projects. Today, because interest rates have gotten so low, everything is kind of mushed onto itself, and the difference between taxable and tax exempt is actually very small. So that the difference in terms of the cost between using the two is minimal. But in this case, by using the taxable, you get out of certain rules at the IRS and federal level. If you're doing tax exempt, it's got to be for public project purposes. You have to spend it down within a certain amount of time. The proceeds can only be used certain ways. Taxable takes a lot of those springs off and gives us more flexibility, including the flexibility that will allow us to identify it as proceeds which can redeem the 2016 COPs, not at a call date in 3 or 4 years, but at a call date right away. Meaning that all the interest on the 16 stops right away, they're paid off right away, and they're gone for good at that point in time. So that's the rationale between using the taxable versus tax exempt. Let's see here, the combined COPs, again, will be structured to mature in the same year as what exists. We'll have a total repayment annually of about $485,500. Would raise about 8.6 million at a total repayment cost of 11.7. Again, a repayment ratio of $1.36 to 1. A very respectable repayment ratio. Usually we come in on COP somewhere closer to 1.85 to 2.1% on kind of, or 2.1 to 1 in a repayment ratio normally. So very low repayment ratio, combination of very good interest rate environment, shorter duration of the bonds as well than what was originally issued. And if you flip one more slide, you will see the grand comparison of the two. All in, this is everything combined 2022, both the new construction and the refinancing, that's kind of the blocks over onto the right side, as compared to your existing 15 and 16 that are outstanding today. The difference over here, you'll see you're paying a little more in the front years, but significantly less in the back years. Overall, the savings is about $2 million to the district. $2 million less than you would pay if we did nothing. With that, I'd like to go over timeline next. Tonight, you have a resolution before you. We've actually been at this for some time. I know we had talked about this in Sunshine this at a meeting in September when we had been here. And we've already gone through the education 17150 process. There is a letter back from the county office. I will give some details on that. We do need to receive our rating, although all the rating work was done with the GO bond issuance. So there's not another meeting for your staff to attend. There's simply some documents we have to send them with the final plan of finance. Once approved, we'll send those over to them. And the rating will be released in fairly short order. We are looking to try to get our preliminary official statement or the offering document finalized and posted right before the Christmas holiday. That will allow us to come back in the first week of January, have conversations with buyers, and hopefully get this thing priced in that first or second week of January. We're targeting that because, in all honesty, markets are getting a little fidgety right now. I don't know if you've been watching or not, but they're starting to swing back and forth. We've seen some spikes up in rates, some spikes down in rates. The general consensus is the trend will be on the upward end for rates going into the future. We are very hopeful that when we hit January, you have a few things working for you in the markets. One, to the extent people have bonuses and are paid out year-end compensation, that money will be going to work in the January timeframe, looking for somewhere to be invested. Two, you may notice that a lot of your bonds have August 1 and February 1 payment dates. There's a February 1 payment date coming up at the end of that month. And so January sometimes is a good month. Everyone's got a fresh slate. It's a new year. People are eager to invest. And usually we see pretty good participation in the January timeframe in the market. And some of that is in part due to payments that are anticipated in February 1, getting them ready to go to work month-to-month terms. So our goal is to try to hit the market when we know we've got a decent number of buyers out there. And if everything goes to plan, by the end of January, we should have this thing closed, funds in hand, and you guys can get your CTE-FP grant money sent over to you within a month or two after that, and be ready to get underway with projects as soon as that summer construction season begins. In terms of the issuance process,
I have a question.
yes,
On that page, what does POS stand for?
preliminary official statement. And that is the offering document. My apologies for that. Like I said, it was the alphabet soup tonight. But the preliminary official statement is the offering document that investors consider, includes information on the district's financials, information on the financing itself, the project, et cetera, for them to make their investment decisions. So as we know, the 17150 process is completed. That process allows for the County Office of Education and the Humboldt County Auditor Controller to review the issuances of non-voter approved debt by school districts and provide opinions on it. A letter was provided dated December 6th. For what it's worth, we have been working very closely with Humboldt County Office of Ed throughout this process. Well, we submitted the formal information to them. I know it says here November 11th. It was actually November 2nd when we originally sent the information into them. So we are beyond the 30-day window that allows us to act on this resolution today. Under Education Code 17150, the county and the county office have 30 days to review the transaction before you can legally take action. That being said, we got nothing back from the county, but they were on a call where we discussed this transaction earlier on in the process. There's no obligation for the county to give you back any feedback, and does not appear that they've opted to. Thankfully, Corey did provide us with some feedback. Encourage you to read this, and there are a few things I do want to highlight in here. While they do believe that the debt is affordable within the resources that the district has, they are concerned about deficit spending. And one of the things that occurred during the course of these Itech and other facility projects that were done was the district did transfer approximately 2.8 million, I believe it is, from Fund 35 or into Fund 35 from the general fund. That's been treated as a transfer by your auditors, so it's money that was transferred over, it's completely committed. The county office has always been under the opinion that you perhaps will be getting that back at some point in time. There really isn't a resource to get that back per se. It's money that was spent on projects in all reality. But it is something that realistically, if you wanted to take an accounting of all the stuff that kind of came out of your coffers, you should give some consideration to it at some point in time. If there's ever some extra millions of facility related funding that you have nothing to do with, consider transferring that back over to your general fund to build up your balances to help assuage the concerns about long-term fund balance stability for the district. It's not a make or break thing per se in my mind, but would like to see you keep that in mind as the overall cost of this to the district. Let's not pretend it's not real. It was a transfer. It was a district contribution to get projects done. Certainly got those projects done, but there was no repayment source for that to the district. So technically the projects owe you back a little more money. Perhaps someone will come in and want to do some CTE grant stuff for you at some point in time and could supplant some of this money and allow you to return some of it to yourself via that mechanism. But do want you to be aware of that as something that is a reasonable thing that you could do to help build your fund balances if those resources should become available. With that being said, if there are any other questions about the 17-150 letter, I'm happy to dig into them, but that was really the one highlight that me and Corey talked about that I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of. And for what it's worth, I've talked with Corey, I think 2 or 3 of the last 3 or 4 days here, business days, to go over all of this stuff, as well as some meetings early on as well. There's nothing about this that they're not aware of. They actually had this presentation I'm giving tonight for over a week now.
Shannon, I just wanted to point out that the board doesn't have copies. Do we have
Yeah,
copies?
there's
of
a
the
whole
letter?
bunch of them. Make sure they get them.
Okay.
They're sitting on the table.
And Corey Weber basically said the last paragraph is really the most important thing. Most of the information in the letter from HCOE is information that we have furnished to HCOE. And then in the end, he discusses the, I think it's summary and recommendation. Is that?
Yeah, summary and conclusion. I'll just read that for your education. They'll pass around the copy here. Based on our analysis and review of the data provided, it appears that the district will have adequate resources to mitigate risks associated with this issuance of debt, and repayment is probable. If you have any questions or concerns about our review, please contact me. That's kind of where he left it at. Long story short, we could do nothing. You would still have the COP obligations that you have today. You would still have a larger obligation from the state for what you would have to repay by not repaying more of the 2016 COPs. Ultimately, it's not the perfect solution, but it is probably the best fiscal solution that we can find at this point in time. And again, we are not giving up on additional consideration in the future, but for where we are now, this, I believe, gets us the Itech building completed and the debt in a manageable position going forward. So with that, the issuance process is very similar to any issuance process of debt. We talked about the one nuance of 17-150. For the issuance of this combined COP, you will have, like any other COP, like the existing 15 or 16, a lease structure. California requires you to have a lease structure, and the certificate of participation is actually investors participating in that lease. So they get the lease revenue, which turns into the repayments for the COP. In that process, let's see here, we propose, because it is a lease, to use the same asset as is securing the 2016 COPs under the lease. That would be the Hoopa High School and elementary campuses. I would note that the 2015 COPs are secured by a lease of Trinity Valley Oaks. And if we are to repay those off, that lease would go away. And so the Trinity Valley Oaks site would be released from any of these obligations. Not a big deal per se, unless you want to do some lease back or modernization type work on a facility, where such leases can sometimes cause a little bit of extra work. But the Trinity Valley Oak site would be released, and we would still retain the lease on the existing site, which is currently secured at 16. So we're not putting any additional sites on board. We're releasing one and leaving one in place to cover the remaining 2022 COP. And let's see here, we will also work to get redemption provisions as liberal as possible. I just would warn you that as markets get a little fidgety like they are now, the ability to get more liberal redemption provisions tends to go down a little bit, but we are going to try to target something to allow you callability in 4 to 5 years. Don't know if you have a source for that callability just yet in terms of funds that you believe in to show up, but a future GEO bond program could certainly pay off portions of this. Future resources could pay that off as well. Any legally applicable source of funds could really be applied to that. And the redemption provisions allow you to make payments sooner, to retire that debt sooner. To the extent you do that, the overall cost goes down, 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 makes the debt that much cheaper. In terms of the actual process to approve this, it all is done via a resolution, very similar to what we did in September with the GEO bond authorization. You will have a resolution which you will approve. That resolution approves other documents as to their form. That includes a corporation resolution, which is your counterparty on the lease, site lease, a lease agreement, and assignment agreement, which are all kind of assumed as part of the California law process to get a site under lease. California does not allow you to lease a site to yourself, which requires you to have this counterparty and do these additional agreements. So all this documentation is pretty standard stuff. Your 2015 COPs had it, your 2016 COPs had it. Any COP in the state of California has these same kind of agreements associated with them. There's also a trust agreement, which really is spelling out the financial specifics of the certificates themselves. And then because we are refinancing some prior debt, there will be an escrow agreement. And finally, there's a certificate purchase agreement. You go through the overall document, you'll notice there are 2 of them in this case. There'll be one for taxable bonds, one for tax exempt. By virtue of the 2 bond types, we can't do them under a single agreement. We'll have separate agreements, but it will be one preliminary official statement. It will be treated as one single issuance and will not be like 2 issuances where everyone's charging fees on each issuance. The fees will be allocated between those 2 on a pro rata basis. And then finally, you have that preliminary official statement, or that POS, as I like to call it, which is the offering document. And by your approval of the resolution, you're approving all of those documents as to their format, very similar with the GEO bonds. You're directing staff to complete and update those once the pricing process is done. So all those blanks in there are really awaiting information that we don't know yet, like what the final interest rates are, etc. And with that, before we step off of this, I do want to just touch on some additional considerations. These are my warnings to you, or my things that you really should be aware of. We've talked about one of them, which is the interfund borrowing. But you're very close to completing this facilities journey, which was commenced over a decade ago, multiple administrators ago. I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 of you were on the board originally at that point in time, perhaps. But we're looking to replace the Itech building and deliver all 3 of the CTE pathways that were originally delivered. It will be a smaller building, but it is viable and seems to achieve the goals while limiting the encroachment on the general fund and utilizing financings which will ultimately cost less to the district than what exists now. You may be required to repay that $2.7 million. That is something you have to keep in mind, and it's something that kind of hangs over your future. We thought about trying to incorporate that into this. We don't know what the amount is, and we want to go for consideration. So we figured, why raise the amount? Let's see if we can make it go away. But that will require some lobbying efforts. Really do encourage you to go down that pathway. Keep in mind the political landscape we're in right now. We've got a certain governor who is just subject to a recall, who's going to be on the ballot again very soon. He needs support. You have a very compelling story to tell, where you could either be an angry, mad group of folks that are from a group that he claims to take care of, and represent groups that he claims to take care of, or they can make this go away and truly take care of you in some small modicum to make this better. I do believe that if you get to the right folks, that will be heard, and some consideration probably can be achieved to mitigate the overall obligations to you over the long run. Certainly making that 2.7 million kind of clawback go away would be the best of all circumstances. I honestly don't think it serves much utility. It serves to incrementally hurt your budgets And realistically, I can't think of a single project in the state of California that, well, that money is just going to be the make or break, and that's what makes it, happen. The reality is the school facility program is quickly running out of funding, and the 2.7 is not what's going to save it. A new statewide bond or some new funding source for that program will. So I just think the clawback is egregious, and quite frankly, we've tried. It's simply administratively the offices that we're talking to at OPSC and the Department of State Architect and all those folks and CDE have their rule books, and there's nothing in there about these sort of special circumstances. So we got to kind of look and find someone who can help us create some rules for that special circumstance, which is why I encourage the lobbying.
On the lobbying, is that something your firm does?
You guys actually have been working with Capital Advisors Group on that, which is Jack O'Connell and Kevin Gordon's team. And Abe Hajela has been the kind of point person on that. And I will talk with Abe as we close this out and kind of put that final plan of finance in. We've had plenty of group calls on all of these various matters. From Itech design is actually a standing weekly call with the architects and ourselves and district staff to deal with the Itech project and keep it moving forward. We'll probably pull Abe into one of those calls here coming up in the next week or two. But what I want to be able to do is put the final plan of finance together once this is approved, send it to the state, get them to send you the money that they owe you, and then begin to talk with them about how we can mitigate some of those things that they may do in the future. Finally, my final recommendation is, with this, we're not doing hardship for the Itech, so officially you guys would be out of the hardship rubric. Really would encourage you to take a pause. Even if there's little projects, whatnot you want to do, take a pause, give yourself a few years, get the Itech building up and running, get yourself back at home, get your programs back up and running. And then at that point in time, after 2 or 3 years, perhaps look around and see if there are any projects or punch list things that the district wants to get done or needs to get done. But for the time being, let's put this as the bow on top of cleaning up all the financings that we can, getting the projects complete, and giving yourself some space. Your new superintendent was new when we were still deep into this process, but been here for a year or two now, has not had a day where this has not been part of their reality. And I think, there's a lot going on. We've got to reopen schools, pandemic related stuff. Take a step back, pause, be done with facilities for a little while. Focus internally on operations, getting good quality CTE programs up and running, working with your community college to maybe augment and help those programs. They can also be a great resource to help fill in things that you maybe did not get back out of the 12,000 square feet originally. And get yourself in a stable footing. With 2 or 3 years passing by, there should be new funding at the state level for the school, the statewide school bond. There should be new rules in place. All that stuff probably will be beneficial for communities like yours. And there's really no rush, I believe, to do any other projects right now. Of course, the critical health and safety thing, do what you must do, but I think everything's been modernized pretty much, but for maybe 1 or 2 buildings. All the mold has been remediated, and with the Itech completion, really the last of those kind of projects on that list will be done. Do your superintendent a favor and just give her and the staff a pause from facilities related stuff, because it's been quite the fun, but not the stuff that you sign up to be a superintendent for, I'm sure. So with that, any additional questions? Sorry that took so long, but there's a lot there and a lot to go over. Really happy that we're just approaching what I won't call the ideal ending, but a survivable ending that gets, that Itech building built. I do understand what that means to the community. And I'm glad that we were able to do it at a time and in a way that it's going to cost the district significantly less than it originally had. The $11.2 million COP, if you had my suggestion and we were going back in time and I wasn't involved in this, probably should have been paid off right away. And if you needed additional COP, do an additional COP. The idea behind rolling that money over was to save a little bit of money on issuance related costs. The issuance related costs are a few $100,000. I can honestly tell you that your administration's time spent in Sacramento alone has probably cost more than that. And the delays and everything with inflation probably have cost you even more than that as well. So next time, let's take smaller bites of the apple, not kind of reach so far. But I think we get to an okay, acceptable solution with some prospects for future improvement as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then with that, I have one other final thing. This one will be very quick, I promise. My other item on here is just a summary of the general obligation bond refunding. We've got a small presentation on that. First page shows you the repayment. I'll keep it to very short information. We've been funding a significant amount of the remaining general obligation bonds. These are bonds that are paid by a levy on the tax base. It doesn't come out of your general fund and those other sources, but it does impact your tax payments. Overall, in total, we would save, remember, I think we talked about $700,000. We were able to get to $948,000 in savings. Pretty good. I'm a perfectionist. There was a day or two when rates were really good and we were slightly above $1 million. We didn't quite capture that. I just like the big round numbers, but we got darn close to that. What does that mean? On average, assuming that we have 2.5% tax-based growth each year here in the district, meaning the assessed values or the taxable values of property grow by 2.5% every year, which they generally run on average. It's a savings of about $5.74 per year per $100,000. So if you have a $200,000 home, multiply by 2, $500,000 home multiplied by 5, but about $5.74 per 100,000 each year through 2046. Total amount for your typical kind of $100,000 worth of assessed value over time, about $143.60 in savings through 2046. So this is money that your taxpayers get to keep. If we don't refund these bonds, the people in DC and in New York that collect the interest on these will happily take your money. Instead, there's about $1 million will be staying in the community here that won't be going out because of the refinancing. Same team was involved. Really would like to thank your attorneys, Lozano Smith, for their efforts on cracking the resolutions, documents, etc., to get that all wrapped up and closed. But also the team that did the stuff with respect to your documents you're seeing here tonight. On the rating front, we did get the district's A+ rating affirmed in the GEO process. That same rating will carry over. It's one notch different, so it's a flat A, not an A+ for a COP. Different credits. Rating agencies look at tax bases as more secure because they don't have a budget process. They simply get taxed. In theory, in a COP, you could say we're not going to make those payments. I wouldn't encourage that, but in theory, you have a legal right to do that. So they get a one notch below the GEO bond. But most districts in the state of California are in that A+ kind of underlying rating category, same as you. And in this environment, with all the uncertainty going on with pandemic, getting your rating affirmed is really a good thing. There's no amount of good news, unless it's really good news, that you're going to get that will make them give you an upgrade in this environment. Unfortunately, if there is an upgrade, it will come after these bonds are priced, but I don't think that's in the cards in the near term. Most of the rating agencies are being very cautious until they see where the economy goes. So great job on the rating. Really would like to thank your superintendent and your assistant superintendent for business services who were pointing incremental and having those conversations with the rating agencies. Did a great job explaining the district, its credit, the finances to the rating analysts. Other stuff in this presentation show you some comparable transactions, showing that interest rates were generally in the same place they were. I would say the first day that we tried to set those interest rates on this didn't go well. We had to pull that sale, and it was just a bad day in the market. It was a day where rates had gone down after going up a bit, and buyers just wanted to sit on their hands. They were hoping that a day or two later, rates might come back up. So we did pull the deal the first time out. About a week later, we were able to get it done, much closer to the levels that we had talked about, a little bit of restructuring and get to those kind of savings levels. The savings, if we had done it on the day would have been closer to just under $700,000, I believe. Got it back up to 900 and change. Feel a lot better about that. It happens sometimes in the markets, and I fully would warn that the COP, same thing can sort of happen. Each day is its own story. There's a lot of volatility going on, but ultimately these things will get done, and they will get done roughly in alignment with the kind of returns and yields that we talked about here. Beyond that, you'll see the issuance cost detail in there. Total issuance cost for the entire thing, including the underwriter and bond insurance, were $231. Consultant cost came in at $160. We did load some of the overall work that has to be done onto the GO bond to save some of the money on the COP, because we wanted as much money as possible in the COP to dedicate toward repayment of the 2016. So on that front, we try to use the GO to make things a little more efficient as well. And I would tell you that between the two transactions, a discount overall significantly, because that preliminary official statement is very similar to the one that was prepared for the GO bonds. All the same information is in there. So a lot of work did not need to be replicated as a result. So we were able to save taxpayers some money and also benefit the district's other transactions in the process, which I think is just the right way to do these things. So with that, that's the end of my presentations. Happy to entertain any questions, and I will be here for the action item if there are any questions at that time.
I just want to thank you.
It's been a long road.
At an earlier meeting, I think about this time last year, we were having a hard time seeing our way through to even getting the Itech building. So thank you.
No, I
appreciate that.
totally agree. And, you know, if the building didn't mean so much to the programs here, it didn't mean so much to the community, I would probably tell you, let's forget about it. Let's come back in a few years and see what we can do. But I do understand what this means, especially for your high school population who are looking for opportunities to get the skills they need to do things outside of just this local region. And so understand the importance of that Itech building. We didn't give up on it. It is smaller, but I think it is very functional. We've had a lot of conversations, and my point has always been, I've pivoted from the one saying, you know, don't do it, to now being the one saying, can we get a little more square footage within that envelope? Can we get it all into a little more price? I really want it to be as much as it can be. And to that end, there are certain things like identifying a wall where you can expand if you need to in the future that give you some flexibility for that facility going forward. So really happy with where it came out. Is it the perfect solution? No, but it's a lot better than the $11.2 million that the state wanted back and not getting projects done, which is what we were talking about 2.5, 3 years ago. So very happy with where we are now.
I have a question, just about the pictures. So, on the last picture we looked at, there was the bay, there was 2 bay doors on the front, but on the first picture we looked at, there was a bay door here and a bay door here on the back. I was just wondering if that picture was just not really.
I think what it is you can't really see because of the angles exactly what it's looking like. So my understanding, and there are 2 bay doors kind of on the short slope. There are also bay doors on the back as well, from my understanding, so that we can get vehicles in and out for the auto shop components. And that's a big part of what the conversation has been. Like, we're now at the fine tuning details point of making sure, okay, this design looks great. Now let's see it on the ground. And if you step out of this door, does it work? If you step out of that door, does it work? And in that process, we've discovered some things. The original pad was a little different height. We'll probably have to do some adjustment to the pad height to make all the slopes work out. We had noticed that if you come down the driveway, it's a bit steep. So we got to kind of get everything leveled out so you can get a vehicle in and out in a sensible way.
Right.
And these are all kind of the little considerations that go into making sure this thing is 100% right. It's one of the reasons why I want to have a little bit of cushion, because I've seen how bidding comes in here. And if we do have to make a change to make this a fully functional building, I want there to be the resources there so that we don't have to go get the general fund again. That would be what I'd like to avoid.
Didn't we have the pad already set in place for that building?
It is,
Okay.
but it appears to be aligned a little below the street and in between kind of where the school height is.
Okay, yeah.
And there might need to be some adjustment because we were looking at where it sits and how much slope you have to get a car in there. And, you know, if you put too much slope on a car, it'll bottom out and kind of hit the flat area before it gets to flatten out and go straight. So little fine tuning things like that. You're not going to see it in these renderings at this point in time, but that's why we're revising the final plans. It's why they don't get submitted until January, because we need time to kind of work through all that. And I know their team has been out here on site and kind of going through all those pieces. And like I say, every week there's a call. I know Missy's been on it in the past. Carney's on it regularly. Some of your CTE instructors are on it as well. We've been going over this and trying to make sure that, yes, this really does meet the bill. And that's the point I made to everyone was, you know, look, yes, we have a price constraint, but we have to have a fully functional building. Anything less than that is unacceptable. So that's what we're going for.
Do you recall what our original building square footage was?
12,000.
was about double.
Our original was
Yeah.
12,000?
It was.
Oh, it seems so little.
It
Okay.
was pretty large, on the larger end of the scale of what normally you would see in such buildings. But the reality is that we have two things going on here. One, construction cost inflation is eating up some of our square footage. Two, because of the fire and the insurance settlement not being as much as we think it should be, we don't have the same level of resources. Realistically, we've talked about this. We believe it can accommodate all of those, and that's been a question I've tried to ask every time I'm on the phone with your CTE staff. Does this meet everything that you need? If there's anything else that you need, let's mention it now. Let's make sure we've got it all thought out. But I believe they are very comfortable with and have said significant input into that design.
Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Martha, can I read my board report? I do have it printed if you want to read along. Okay. Just want to take any notes. So I have the various sections that I generally report on. First one's governance and administration. I want to remind the board that we agreed to complete the LEA self-assessment. That's part of our MTSS initiative. We agreed that we would do that when we have all 7 trustees here. So just keeping that on our minds. I do have some upcoming trainings that the trustees may want to participate in, including LGBTQ 101, youth mental health first aid, which I have a flyer for. So part of our governance and administration is our school site. So all of our principals are here. Thank you. They've been working on their site plans. We have the school accountability report card, which is the SARC, which is will be brought to you at the January board meeting. There's a lot of data that has to be collected and entered into that. And I want to let the board know that the state extended the audit due date to January 31st. It's usually December 15th. So I don't know if that's going to be ongoing, but so our audit will be completed and issued back to the state the next month. Other parts of finance, I did have a call with the director of fiscal services at the county office today, a little bit about the things that Shin's presenting on, but we also talked about the auditor controller's office, because there has been, it's been newsworthy. And he was saying that because our financial system is our official record of our finances, we're not really as vulnerable as other agencies have been. So there's definitely some lag time and there are some issues, but we are not seeing something catastrophic the way that some of the other agencies have in the county. Other parts of finance, the California state minimum wage increases to $15 an hour beginning January 1st, 2022. KTJUSD implemented this rate effective January 1st, 2021 in agreement when we did with the salary restructuring with CSEA. And the first interim budget is on the agenda tonight with a recommendation of a positive certification. We are currently pretty well funded with one-time COVID monies. We will be carefully monitoring the structural deficit that is projected in the out years. You'll see that on the first page on the multi-year projection. And refinancing of the certificate of participation will afford the district some savings on our debt servicing while providing the necessary funding to complete the Itech building. Next area, local control and accountability. The State Board of Education's approved LCAT template is provided. It's just here as an informational item later in the agenda. And one significant note was that stakeholders are now called educational partners. I think will make it friendlier for people who want to be participants. In terms of health and safety, since the beginning of the school year, we've had 42 positive COVID tests that were administered by our staff. 7 more since the last time that I gave you a report. We are urging all families to give consent for COVID testing for their children. We would really like to be able to continue testing to the greatest extent possible, especially when we return from the winter break. The QR code is on our website. Most of the schools have sent out consent. Some schools have 100% consent. Orleans is nodding yes. So it's really helps us with keeping our rates in school low.
I'm curious, how many are actually using the QR code?
I don't know how they register. Karen, do you know, do most of your families register? through
I
that?
would say about a quarter of our families use the QR codes initially. So they're very easy. I mean, you just scan it or go to that website, there's a link. And then families can register. The benefit of that is when you test the kid and input the results, the family gets an email. You know, so if they ever need proof that like they had just been tested or whatever, they get the email. Otherwise, there's just a paper consent that we had them sign, and then we have to like scan it in and attach it to their name that the district put in there. And so when you scan that, the email technically goes to the student, but those email accounts don't work, so. But
I'm
nobody
wondering
really
if there's any training for parents that don't know how to use it.
Well, the third way was just actually sending the link out.
That's what
So
we do, but we haven't used, none of my parents have used the QR code. We just email them the link and they click in and they do it, and they can all do it right from their phone. It's so easy in their home. So that's worked, but I don't have 100% either, but I just have some that decline. And if their kids are exposed, then they take them out for 10 days, put them on infant study, and then they return after that. Just a couple of families.
Yeah, I'm saying the QR code and the link, I mean, that's the same thing. So if you're asking specifically about the QR code, I don't know, maybe 5 people have used that. I did.
I did too. I might be the only parent for my school.
But
the link, I think, was really easy.
the
as
link
well.
is easier, yeah, I
It
sent
is.
that out to Parent Square.
But I think you also had a computer set up in front of the testing site that was really helpful.
I did do
Um,
that.
Because then Karen could help parents fill it out right there on the spot. That was really helpful for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we want to have consent. High schoolers can consent for themselves. I think we have a pretty good rate at the high school simply because the athletics kind of generated that and the dance, I suppose. Kids registered for testing. Personnel, Margot Robbins has announced her retirement effective February 3rd, 2022. The Indian Ed Director position has been updated under her review. We went over it several times to make it modern. We'll be accepting applications until December 14th and hope to hold interviews upon returning from winter break. I'm not going to get nostalgic because she still has 2 months to go. So then we can, we're kind of shocked, and she really has some good things that she put out to staff, letting us know what her next steps are in her life. It was really a sweet way for her to announce that officially. We continue to advertise our vacancies. There was an article in the Two Rivers Tribune this week regarding our staffing and the efforts that we're making to continue to staff, the ubiquitousness of the shortage of staffing in all schools across the state and the country and pretty much all areas of even private industry. And our staff are working exceptionally hard to meet our students' needs. In terms of student services, we have a total enrollment of 982 students across the district. 94 of them are currently enrolled in independent study program. Inter-district attendance. So there's a specific window for families that would like to either attend KTJUSD that live out of the district, or if students live in the district and want to attend other school districts. There is an agreement among Humboldt County schools that those permits should be filed between December 1st and February 1st. We will expect that families who are new to that process will visit the school of residence and meet with the administration or with the counselor to talk about their educational options. That's another part of this countywide agreement. The board also asked me to give an update about the wellness project that we're working with Swell. Craig Kimball has been instrumental in moving all of this forward. We've been working with Jessica Colvin from Swell and Two Feathers Native American Family Services. Our consultant conducted a health and wellness needs assessment, which included interviews with 32 staff. Deliverables have included the wellness coordinator job description template, weekly meetings with the social worker team to develop referral forms, and flow charts for both the referral process for students and crisis response. They are drafts right now, but they're pretty close to being finished, and we expect to have them out to staff in January. And I am excited to announce the startup of a Rainbow Task Force. There was a lot of interest from staff, from our staff. I put out a survey. I was surprised at how many people were interested in joining that. We're going to start with a focus on the high school, and the executive director of Queer Humboldt will be facilitating those meetings in the spring. Student academics, success for all is a lot of work. It requires coordination, patience, and grit. I visited school sites with Terry Faulkner, our lead SFA coach. She expressed that our district is further along than she had thought we would be, considering we didn't receive full training at the beginning prior to the school year starting. And considering that we had the school closure week right at the beginning of the year. So it was really exciting to go around with her. And she is somebody who travels nationally, supports schools nationally, and has been doing this for a really long time. Her insights are really valuable, and she's there just to help us move along. Everybody's been working a lot, and we know that this is the year where it being our first year of implementation, there's mistakes, there's setbacks, but overall, it is notable in the classrooms how much progress kids are making, and teachers too. I mean, just they're getting into it. So another part of academics is our technology. We currently have 400 Chromebooks in the elementary schools, and you know we have almost 800 kids, so that is not a 1-to-1 ratio. We're anxiously awaiting the delivery of 675 additional Chromebooks that have been ordered, and we just kind of wait as the supply chain takes its own life. And as part of E-rate funding, we also will be able to order devices that are intended, they call it the homework divide. So we will have some devices that we can get into homes, but we really urgently need them in our schools as a first step. And then in terms of curriculum, and aside from our Success for All, the curriculum committee is working on a recommendation for a writing program for K-8. One of the focuses is to be prepared for offering training for staff. There has been a curriculum that has been used, but it was not 100% used, and there was not as much training offered as needed. So Erin and Karen are the leads on the curriculum committee, and we had a discussion about really setting this year up for the implementation of the training and getting people prepared. We think it'll be a much smaller endeavor in terms of selecting something. At the high school, instructional materials for physical science have been selected and will be reviewed prior to recommendation to the board for adoption. A couple of years ago, the biology curriculum was updated, and physical science, and well, I don't know, physics and chemistry were not. So the teachers in that one teacher, Erin,
Yeah.
is ready to there are some materials that have been that will come to us. And then the high school is also seeking to adopt a social studies curriculum, but had one curriculum has not been selected.
On that item, at our board meeting here, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 years ago, we were trying to find a social science textbook that also included the governance of Indian tribes, and we didn't identify one at that time. There were a lot of areas where things could have been implemented very easily, but were not on various topics, sovereignty. The feds have sovereignty, the states have sovereignty, so do the tribes. It seemed like it would be an excellent way to include Indian tribes into the social studies curriculum, but I don't know if the United States is there yet, but if at all, we can identify something that is inclusive, I think the whole United States would be in better shape.
Do you remember who's, I remember that meeting too, and I can't remember who was the one that spoke to that, because
That's Robert Anderson.
was it Robert Anderson?
I think that's why he doesn't have a clear pathway. I mean, I'm going hearsay, Aaron is saying yes, but just that, I think he's not really satisfied with perhaps exactly the issue, so it's not, I think he's looking for something that may not exist, I don't know, and so I don't know if we're gonna have to make a decision of an adoption and then ensure, and especially with the teachers that we have, that they, you know, we know they'll do this, they'll supplement,
Right,
but I think it's an imperfect.
yeah, he was looking for something that was inclusive, not where we had to. pull in
Yes,
supplements.
yes.
So do we know, did he ever?
I don't think he has found it, and then there's the issues of the content, and then there's the issues of the conditions of our materials. And I think that, you know, it's becoming, it becomes expensive at some point to replace materials that are so old because the publishers aren't releasing them anymore.
Am I correct in recalling that in order to stem our state textbook funding, it has to be state adopted?
No,
It doesn't.
it does not. But we have a process, so we do not have to have state board approved materials. There still is the process of looking at different recommendations, allowing the public to review, and the local governing board actually approves it. Should be standards aligned. So that's, you know, there are the criteria, and last year was quite an endeavor to pilot that whole process, since it was a high stakes decision, but yes, there are alternatives. And I would recommend, we also had a discussion about bringing this problem to the IPP task force and to see if we can think of some way to move forward with these. Yeah, okay, almost done. Professional development, there's some excellent professional development opportunities coming up in the winter and spring. Board is invited to participate in any of these PD with staff. We have administrative special education workshops, a workshop, and then ongoing office hours with the Humboldt Delmar SELPA. There is a Saturday training series for our education specialists or teachers that work in special education. We have youth mental health first aid with Two Feathers coming up. There are 2 different training days that are being offered during the winter break. I have flyers for you if you would like to sign up. It is a virtual training, so it's up to 30 people, and we'll get the principals to put them up at school sites. Margot did send out this flyer. And then we're currently scheduling restorative practices training with staff from HCOE who will come out here and do in-person trainings, probably 2 evenings in February. And you're welcome to that as well. They can take, I think that they said they can have up to 40 people. And my last part are my shout outs. I want to thank Captain John, students and staff for inviting me to a wonderful holiday luncheon right before our on break. I want to thank the Trinity Valley staff who worked really hard to put together a basketball tournament last weekend. That was awesome. There's a lot of energy there. And I also want to congratulate and thank the Hoopa Elementary Girls Junior High basketball team. And I went to the practice yesterday and I told them that they were the talk of the town. At their Friday night game at the Trinity Valley tournament, we witnessed their teamwork, sportsmanship, and grit. And they are model athletes and make us really proud. It was really incredible to watch them play. So that is my report to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Consent agenda. Now we- I just asked for a motion to-
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I will second that.
Discussion?
Not on consent.
Huh?
No discussion on consent.
No discussion, okay. And so then we just.
All in favor?
Oh, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay, motion carried.
Well, now that we're back in person, we can just do
And we do have,
an overall.
yeah, and we do have item E that we pulled from the consent to deal with separately.
Okay, can we do that now?
Yeah. We have Shin with the first resolution, right at the end. The high school
Okay.
SIPSA.
Eight?
A, because that is the resolution for the refinancing.
Okay. Do I need to read the whole thing? We don't have any.
We don't have any public comment.
So 8A, issuance resolution number 22-8, authorizing the issuance and sale of certificates of participation and including related documents and actions.
I move that we approve.
I second that motion.
Do we need to do it? All in favor, say aye.
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 Against? Okay.
Great.
8B, or do you want to go back to? Let's just finish this one. Establishing the board of trustees calendar for the year 2022.
Some discussion.
So what do you want to make a motion first?
Okay. How am I gonna make a motion if
We don't make a motion.
I make a motion to accept the calendar as presented.
okay,
And we need a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
on March 8th, the superintendent is not available for our board meeting.
Correct. I'll be in Sacramento.
Okay, so we don't need the superintendent here for a board meeting?
In previous meetings, we've had replacement.
Okay,
The assistant could do it, couldn't he?
you could do it.
What's
okay.
happening in March? I think we're doing a second interim.
That's in our meeting.
The March one, we have it for the district boardroom. Yeah. I also consulted with council about, because our bylaws say that our meetings are the second Tuesday, but you can approve a different calendar. They are as well as some bylaws. So I'll be at the Small School Districts Association. That's another, in addition to just being a generally good conference, they do work closely with Capital Advisors, which is the lobbying group that Shin was referencing. It's all, oh, you're wearing an SSP.
Oh, good.
It's all connected. So it's not specifically for the purpose of lobbying, it's for going to the conference, but it's Capital Advisors is always there speaking and it gets us in the door to either the governor's office or to the legislators' offices. We'll be back on the 9th if you wanted to move it to the next day. That week. I would recommend keeping it in that week because on the 15th, we have to have the comprehensive school safety plans. Like the 15th is a pretty critical date. So to change it, I would probably recommend moving it just later in the week. Not to the week before though.
So, okay,
How about the Thursday, then the 10th,
Thursday the 10th.
if March 8th was Tuesday, 10th on the
Okay.
Thursday.
I can't find mine.
You're
Somebody else remind me.
the actual, it's buried underneath.
I think it's the calendar that you can.
Withdraw my motion.
So we can vote on it and vote no.
Wow.
Or make a new one.
I'll make a motion.
So are you suggesting that we put it on the 10th?
That's what I was suggesting.
Okay. I missed it.
So we have a motion on the floor that needs to, something happen.
You wanna
I can withdraw my motion.
revise it?
You withdraw your second? No.
Oh, no,
Okay, so I move we approve the calendar as presented with the modification of the March meeting, making it on the 10th.
Now, is the December, well, I'll second. Okay, I have another question. Is the December meeting this new
Yes.
requirement? Okay,
After the second Friday, first Friday.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor?
I,
Opposed? Okay. Okay, 8C, 2021-2022 first interim budget report.
I move that we, what is it, approve as positive.
Positive certification.
I make a motion to approve that. Positive.
I move that we,
Okay.
we need a second.
I will second. Did you second it already? Okay.
Oh, you.
I made a motion. I think Morley second. Did you?
No, I made a motion.
You made a
You made a motion and I second.
All in, discussion?
I'm just wondering what questions you may have about, well, any of this. I mean, I just want to call your attention to the very first page. I pin it up on my wall until we do the second interim. It just is, it's really helpful. The main things that I just want to have the board, have you look at when you're reviewing the multi-year projections are the differences between our unrestricted and restricted funding sources. And then keeping in mind our one-time money and then our ongoing money. So when you look at the LCFF, that generally is our ongoing money. That is what the governor is issuing. The Title I is generally ongoing money as is impacted money. This year, is the year where we have this large amount of one-time money. Just, in terms of our being able to meet our operational needs. Really helpful. I know, I see this got cut off. I'm sorry, I'm actually going to reprint this out for you all. And then at the end, we, look at our ending fund balances. We have to shift money around from unrestricted money into restricted funds. Cover things like cafeteria deficits. Usually we have a special education contribution. So
So that's what the difference then between the 21-22 is like close to 31,000 combined. And then it's almost $10,000 less in the 23-24
Correct.
projection.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
because of our one.
we swept out the one time.
Okay.
We might not spend it all this year, but we have it allocated for specific things. Yes. So that was the one time with that, basically mostly federal money.
I was happy to see that. It was all black.
Any
What
other
was I-
questions?
Question. All in favor?
I,
Aye. Opposed? Nine, discussion items. Establishment
and then
of
we
a
have to still do 7E.
We pulled the high
Oh, that's right.
school,
Okay.
SIPSA.
Hooper Valley High School 2021-22 school campus student achievement.
I move that we approve the comprehensive needs assessment with the corrections or that have been made that were not in our packet. But we can go over them. I understand they have been updated. Both Well, let's get a second. And
Yeah. Do you want me to read my list because it was everything that Laura Lee said?
Right, the first was corrected, everything, Craig got them all. And then-
Yes.
yeah, and so, first of all, I really am glad that you're on the ball and getting this to us in early stage here. Do you have the corrections?
I have them all right here.
Half of them.
I have them in front of me.
I went and numbered the pages, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that's easier to find it, so I'll just go over what we had identified on page 2, down on the last purple, the last sentence, teachers spelled incorrectly. Teachers, GE, just spelling, it was a typo. On page 4, 1, 2, 3, 4th purple thing, Hoopa Valley High School parents can view their THERE, should be THEIR. And then on the 3rd purple, incorporate typo. Page 6, and there in the 1 through 3rd purple, there is blank percentages for the Native American suspension rate. And I didn't quite understand in that same purple. Hoopa Valley High School currently sits at 28% for proficiency rate in ELA, which is 57.8 points below the state standard and a minus 62.8 point decline from the previous year. I don't know, my math wasn't working on the math thing here. So I don't know. It's just me not comprehending. Also on page 9. There was a 1, 2, 3 purples up from the bottom, amount 1,500, source Title 1. Then there was another 1,500 with no source. I don't know.
That might be because of the drop-down menu, right? There's a, when we do the template, there's a drop-down, and so there's a source that was not identified.
Is this, I have the corrected copy.
Oh.
I don't know if this is the same copy you all had,
No, that's the corrected one.
the corrected copies of those.
But
I think we would have for that one, we'd have to actually type in the strategy, this will be, this funding source will be, because we weren't able to put it in that box, right?
I eliminated, yeah.
Oh, you just took it, okay.
so these corrections are being made. I think maybe if we have questions, maybe you can fill in for us here.
Yes, yeah. I'm following along with you on the corrected version here.
Okay. Okay, well, maybe pass out the corrected version to us.
Yeah, because I have some more. Did you already put in mine to the corrected version?
No, he didn't do it today. So I'm gonna have to print one more.
Shin is about to.
Well, anyway, let me just go over.
Shin's gonna wait for us. Shin's
Oh,
waiting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, Jan.
Thank you.
When it's signed, you want us to email it to you then?
To Kippen.
To Kip? Okay, thank you. Safe journeys.
Okay, on page 13, third pink up from the bottom, other sources, use other, I don't know if that's acceptable. But the last one, strategy activity, the bottom one, parents and guardians will student progress measurements. I think needs a verb in there, receive.
I just did want to clarify that 12,227, is that the amount? It says other. that you're referencing right now? Sure. No, is it, that's the Perkins grant, correct? Yeah. So we can put that up in the actual text of the strategy. So, but that wasn't part of the drop down menu. There's like 25 things you can choose from, but we just didn't have what we needed.
On page 16, the bottom, I just had a question, add a temporary 0.80 dean of students athletic director. I was just curious as to whether there was a existing job description.
I have a job description I can pass out to the board.
Just yes or no.
Just yes or no, okay. Yes.
Page 17, third pink one down, provide a office assistant who will provide clerical support to administrative staff, thus enabling increased. I was wondering the same thing there, if that was, if there was a job description.
And while you're on there, it should be provide an office assistant.
Instead of a and. Yeah. I think that was the biggie though was the last of the whole document. Principal.
Yeah, I saw that. That was kind of, that box was, I think, a little, so I didn't have that originally checked, but I quickly changed that in this document. Thank you for catching that. I did not realize that I clicked that box, but I adjusted, put a different name in there for that one.
Now should I
That
go,
was about 3 principles ago.
now should I go through my list? Because I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was coming.
So, let's see here. Find it. Classroom observations on page 2. Says in the purple, the first line of the purple, it says classroom observation are done. It should be observations, S. Fourth page. Parental engagement. Let's see, where is it? Oh. You fixed it. You fixed it there to THEIR. You fixed it. Okay. Okay, standards assessment and accountability. Okay. There it is. Yeah, page 2. Standards assessment and accountability under use of it should say, oh, you fixed it, the teachers. You fixed it, right? Okay. Page 3, the middle of the page. Teacher collaboration by grade level. The first line Mondays are collaboration day. We have staff meeting. It should say meetings. Okay, then under goal 1. Identified need. Did you do the percentage thing? Put in percentage rates in blanks? So he put them all in there. Okay. And then while I was reading it, I put a note. I'm extremely disappointed in the proficiency rates in language arts and math. Okay, goal 2. That is on page strategy activity 4. Activity 4, the first line. Insert received between will and student. Did he do it?
We'll be able to assess student progress.
Okay. And then activity 5. Activity 5, first line. Delete and, let's see. Identify either all students or one or more. Wonder where that was.
Delete the and.
The and.
Yes, I see it. It's in the first line.
Okay. Oh, yes, it's the first line under strategy activity. And then goal 3. Activity 2.
And I think on that first line, it was, and is okay, those outdoor boxes. Is that what you're saying?
It was plural environments.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm already past there, and he already dealt with it. Goal 3, activity 2. Provide an office, not a. Provide an office assistant. Okay, that's it.
Okay, are we done? Motion is to
Approve the
approve the
corrections.
correction. So I call for a vote.
One more,
Go.
one more comment. I was excited to see a budget for a garden and a greenhouse,
Oh,
but
yeah.
do check with me before you spend some money, because I might be able to make some donations.
Yay.
Good stuff.
Okay.
Add that in.
Okay.
Call for a vote.
Call for a vote. You that first? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Now we're down to. Good job, Greg. Yeah. Establishment of an ad hoc committee for review of board policy.
The board chair has the authority to appoint a couple of members to review board policies. I know that the California School Boards Association sends revisions for review. And in the past, we do have a couple of board members who looked over them and then brought the ones that were necessary to the board for updates. I know some of the updates have to do with changing laws, et cetera. But I don't know, I haven't seen any in a while, so I'm not sure where we're at on that.
Well, I would like to be on that committee just because, do I have other volunteers before I appoint you? Okay, anybody else?
You got two?
I've got two.
That's fine.
Okay.
Two is good. Yeah. I'm
So-
for 3.
Is somebody gonna direct me when we need to?
No,
start?
you just appoint. You got powers now.
Okay. So we'll just discuss when we want to start doing that.
And then you'll work with Dana and I pretty,
Oh, okay.
just getting up to speed. There'll be a little bit of technical training unless you've done that before with the CSBA platform.
Who's done it before? On the board. You want to help us out a little bit?
I can get you started.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, and then we'll maybe discuss. Can we start after the break that way?
All right. Wrote your name small. We give a little bit about.
Just start.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Great, thank you. It's really, I think that's, it'll be time well spent.
Yeah. Okay. Reports and information. KTJUSD, oh, we changed that.
You did change that, yes.
Um,
So, thank you.
Okay, both KTJUSD Sunshine 2022, 23. This is just a report, right?
Yeah, it's just information, so the district is required to sunshine the articles that we would like to discuss in negotiation twice. So this is our first time just saying, hey, here are the topics we would like to talk about with KTTA. At our January board meeting, it'll be actually presented to the board for accepting, and it'll be an action item. And then KTTA will is and CSEA, but they're required to sunshine just once, and they present that as here are the topics we want to talk about. And so we've already, in anticipation of us having our second sunshine and KTTA's first sunshine in January, we have already started scheduling negotiations dates. So to follow up.
Well, cap template for 2022, 23. Discussion about that.
Most of it is actually the instructions.
Yeah.
If you glance at it, it doesn't look significantly different. You know, I've not gone in depth into this, but I just want to make sure that we have LCAP, even if it's just, hey, remember, we have an LCAP always, you know, on the board's agenda, but this is the new template. We work with document tracking services, which really, it makes it easier for us to just input the information. And then as it, I can't remember what it said, so it's the educational partners instead of stakeholders, but we are in the first year of a 3-year plan. The expectation is not that we're going to revamp the goals. It's basically looking at what kinds of metrics did we set for 3 years from now, and then of course doing the annual update on this year's goals. But LCAP season will be around the corner. We'll have to really get started in January. Getting some updates.
Staff reports. Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, Director of Special Education. Kimball.
Well, there's a report attached, and it's fairly simple because November was a fairly brief month. All the reports were due in August, and so we had a couple of weeks where I was able to simply focus on what kinds of trainings we're going to start having for staff. So that's why the brevity of the report.
Thank you. School site reports. Captain John Continuation High School. You want to? Do I have them speak on behalf of the district?
that, we are asking for reports so that you all can read them ahead of time. I certainly would encourage the board if they have any, clarifying questions or kudos to, the reports. That's kind of a style.
I do. I'm really pleased with what I'm seeing going on at Captain John. And the different activities. I don't know, I did find a couple of, I was interested in what wreath making was. I'm sure it's.
Sorry, Miss Waddy.
And then I was trying to add up 48 students enrolled, 21 12th graders, 24, that's 45. 3 10th graders, 48, and 1 9th grader, so
That's
the 9th grader must have been added later to make. Okay.
Sorry about that.
But, yeah, thank you.
Oh, and I love the 9-week personal finance.
Yes.
I love that. That is so awesome.
Yeah, Mr. O'Neill has just started that course this week, and we learned about how to look at, well, the students and I learned about how to read our paycheck stubs and what it means to our taxes. So it was really interesting. Yeah, it's a great program.
I think that's a good one. I hear a lot from the community that our students need to learn these things. I think that's a good shout out.
Life skills.
Yeah.
And Jack Norton and Witchbeck Elementary School.
Did you present your report?
Yep.
You have what Mr. Anderson did already?
I was pleased to see that the HCOE nurse is attending the school. I was wondering if they were going to kick in and help us very much.
We're at Jack Norton today doing COVID testing. And I signed up with the district, to get tested as well, and I tested negative.
Nice.
So-
Glad to hear that.
It's pretty good. It's really good the way she does it. They're doing a good job.
Oh, with our staff.
It was your staff that did it, yeah.
Yes.
Name's Melissa.
She hit 2 schools. She hit Witchbeck and Jack Norton.
And Jack Norton, yeah.
I tested negative also.
Because we have someone that has tested positive, or one of our teachers aide, and I was surprised that someone had told me that some of her kids were still in school or something, but I found out that wasn't true, that people just kind of start freaking out when you hear, someone tested positive, so that the rumors were false, so that's good.
Thanks, Jason. But elementary school.
Charlie was here.
Oh,
He is a little, I'm wondering if we have a
she went through.
call. He's very young.
Valley High School.
Accepting the report. Did you have any questions for me?
Oh, I'm excited for your basketball season.
I've been hearing about the enrichment activities that are going on at your school. That's wonderful.
I was wondering, what is your scientific studies with your emergency services?
What is it?
You have scientific studies with emergency services?
That's through our cultural studies course, or natural resources with Natalie Scott,
Oh, okay.
working with our neighbors across the way. More of them coming in, and more of those enrichment type courses that she's talking about during school hours, or some are after school, so it just depends, but just trying to, expose our kids to different things right around our neighborhood, so.
Yeah, you know, when my son went to school at Eureka High School for a year, and one of their courses was firefighter 1. Have we ever considered that?
I'm not aware, not since I've been there, but I know we did prior pre-COVID, we were taking field trips across the street and looking at their technology. The fire chief at the time, we were really looking at trying to expanding, and definitely, I mean, we've had Pacific Gas and Electric come in and, you know, show our kids and talk about that, but that's something we definitely want to explore going forward, is more technical skills and technical jobs that are out there for our kids that might be going on that alternative path.
So like, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, Cooper Wildland came over, brought their battalion chiefs and their captains, was teaching courses to our kids, and basically was helping them get through that basic 32 course to be a wildland firefighter.
Yeah, you can be right out of high school, right
Yeah.
into.
But when that fire chief left, that program kind of ended.
Okay.
That was actually before Craig got.
Right, must have been right before.
You know, I had recently seen on Facebook that they were offering wildland courses. I think it was in February for students and young people that wanted to be wildland firefighters. And I can't remember. It was not too long ago, actually, maybe a couple of weeks.
But with COVID, everything for the basic 32 is online through the National Fire Academy. I was just reason I know that my son went through the basic 32 and everything was online. So hopefully when COVID comes down, they'll actually have the courses, you know, here back in Newport.
Morgan's Elementary. I particularly liked yours because a couple of my grandchildren are. It was really good.
My only update is that we're making changes to our Christmas program. We are probably not going to have it with a public, I don't know, with families coming. We had 2 COVID cases yesterday, and we're feeling like there are some COVID cases in the community, and so that wouldn't be the best thing to do. So we're planning to have the kids perform it in front of each other, and like an assembly type thing, and record it, and put that on the internet or something, which we'll have to make sure we have releases. Yeah.
And King Valley.
Yeah, I think the big excitement for us is that we're doing stuff again. Our PTO has a book fair going right now, so if anybody wants any children's books, it's open during this week. We had one family movie night that they put on, and that was, they didn't have a huge turnout, but they set it pretty late, so they have one this Friday again. We changed the time for little kids to be able to come, little like this. So things, our basketball tournament was pretty successful. You know, I see, it was my very first one. Trinity Valley has not had a basketball tournament in over a decade that I could see when I looked back, boys or girls. We also have a boys set up, and teams are already like lining up, which I made sure all of our local teams, our district people get first spots, you know. I found out I'm one of the only schools that did a girls tournament. So I feel like people are scared to do things. Schools are scared to do things. And I feel like we kind of broke the ice. Of course, I'm still like crossing my fingers that I don't get any calls in the next few days, like, but all of our teams COVID tested before they came, or the day that they came. And, you know, I just think doing all the preventative measures have been really successful. I chose not to do a Christmas program because I just thought people might not like that too much, like packed in like sardines. I could imagine, you know, our Christmas program gets pretty big. So we're going to do an assembly right before we go out too, and sing some holiday songs. It's just going to be informal, but yeah, I think just doing things again is what's exciting. And I think we need to do those things again. And then if we have to like pare back a little bit and go, oh wait, pump the brakes, you know, then we'll just do that and kind of fill things out. But I think it's going well. It's exciting. our school's really excited.
Thank you.
Jacqueline, I wanted to share one of the, when I just stopped in at the Hoop Elementary girls basketball practice and I was leaving, I said, do you have any questions for me? And they said, can we extend our season? They had so much fun playing at the tournament. And so our kids are, we're all so happy that they're playing. One of the significant things with basketball that made it actually happen was that the public health changed the masking requirements for students in active play. That was really significant. We think we could have gotten our kids on the court, but we weren't going to get our refs on the court. So that was, and then it turned around. So that.
Yeah, that was really good because 2 schools from Trinity County wouldn't even play us if we were masked. I was like shocked. So we told them, well, we have to be masked. It was the first week. And then we called them back 24 hours later and they said, we already filled the spots. And I said, okay, well, so be it.
Yeah. Our kids are asking for playtime now.
Yeah, we just want to play people. So we want to have a good time. Yeah.
Employee group report. KTJA has a nice report in here. We don't have anybody from KTJA.
And we did not get anything from CSEA.
And trustee area report. Yeah, trustee area report, anybody? Thank you.
I have the trustee report. I enjoyed going to the PTO meeting, Trinity Valley's PTO meeting in November, and learned some things from parents that we had requests for that I passed on to our superintendent, and we'll see what she finds out from that. And I'm planning on going to the PTO meeting tomorrow night and also the book fair. I usually go to the book fair and for my grandchildren.
The parents were really happy to see Mrs. Waddy there too. It was nice. It was good. I think they felt like, ooh, we have a board member here, you know, it's like, okay, guys. But I think they just enjoyed having your ear and knowing that like you're invested, you know, that's important.
It's nice that they're able to have a meeting at the Bigfoot State House.
Yeah.
Because they have a special room set aside.
Yeah. Pretty good.
Anybody else? All right.
I move we adjourn.
I
second.
Wait a minute. Did I ask you to say that? All in favor? Who was second?
Debbie. Longest drive.
Okay, Madam President, you have to sign something.
Wow.
And then you leave your folders.
Yeah, we'll get it.
The hiring list and things like that. Thank you all very much.
Here, you have to.
There were so many pages that came.
So when we went,
I couldn't find it.
after we had this, I'll let you know that Lucia did text me back. She was on an airplane. So it would not have been a good conversation.
Oh.